back to another episode of Sit and Spin with me, your host, Joe Royland. It's our first show of 2018, originally meant for this one to be our last show of 2017, especially considering the subject matter, being that this is going to be talking about my favorite album of last year. And today also just happens to be my birthday, and there is a raging nor'easter, or as they're calling it, a cyclone, bomb cyclone rather, outside going on. So I've been pretty much trapped inside all day, except for the times I've gone out to clear out the driveway. And very low visibility, snow just blowing everywhere, a lot of white, which kind of also plays in with the title of today's record, being The Blinding White of Nothing at All by the Lees of Memory. It's the third album from John Davis, Brandon Fisher, and Nick Slack. John Davis is the vocalist guitarist who also plays over a dozen different instruments on this record. Brandon Fisher plays guitars and keys, and both John and Brandon were in one of my favorite bands to come out of the 90s, Superdrag. And along with Nick Slack on drums, they are the Lees of Memory. We reviewed the band's debut album, if you might remember, SISYPHUS Says, back in episode number 74. It was released in 2013, but kind of like that album then and this album now, we didn't really get around to reviewing it until early 2014. Sadly, I did not get around to fully reviewing the band's sophomore album, Unnecessary Evil, in full on its own episode, but did give it coverage in last year's annual Top 5 Vinyl Albums Picks, episode number 140, that I do with my friend Scott over at Righteous Vinyl every year, and that will probably be next week's show, or as soon as we get around to recording it. It is a double record set, produced by John Davis and Mike Purcell, who also happened to mix and master it. And speaking of mixing and mastering, like the band's last album, instead of being in stereo, it is mastered in mono instead of stereo, so an interesting touch there. And this record brings the band for score quality for 3 for 3 as releases go, in that it is another exceptional release from the band. It was originally announced and issued back in April of this year via the band's Pledge Music campaign, but the actual CDs and digital copies didn't come out until earlier in the fall, and the vinyl just came out, I think it was early November that we finally got the record. Self-released on the band John Davis's Brand Music Records. And with the Pledge Music campaign, there's pros and cons to that. The pros is that you're dealing directly with the fans, and they're the ones who are funding it, and you're really only going to be pressing up enough copies, for the most part, to really meet those people's demands. Now, the downside, though, is that you get very limited distribution, and the record's not necessarily going to get into the hands of other people who really should be hearing it because it's so damn good, and get kind of the coverage that it normally should be. Because more people really should be hearing this album. You won't find this in your local record store. You'll only be able to get it now, except for the vinyl, which unfortunately is now sold out. It comes on a nice white vinyl pressing too. But you can still get limited versions of the CD, and you can get digital copies via the band's Bandcamp site, which you can see in the links in the notes, and you can get the digital version of it on iTunes if that's your thing. But as I said before, this is my album of the year, song for song, 24 tracks, not a dud in the bunch. Most of the album's music, one could say, is an homage to all the great bands and artists, particularly from the 60s and 70s, that John Davis grew up loving. You can spot the influence all over the album, with artists too numerous to mention, although I'm going to try and name all the ones that I picked up on. I probably missed a bunch of them too, as we go over the song track by track, but this gives the album a sort of gateway nostalgia feeling of comforting familiarity. Yet at the same time, it feels both timeless and new in its quality, and also somewhat naturally. There's a couple songs that sound like Davis and Fisher's previously been Superdrag, maybe minus the punkier influences, but damn if it isn't even better than Superdrag was, and I really love Superdrag. And aside from being just like an incredibly talented musician and really prolific, John Davis is an artist in the artistic sense as well, in that he has designed all the album artwork for all of the band's releases, including this one. Very cool from John Davis. But let's talk about the album songs. We'll go song by song for the album really quick. There's 24 tracks, so I'm going to try to do it real brief for each track. The album kicks off with Where the Sun Never Shines, the tune you just heard. It opens with a bit of pictures of Matchstick Men meets SoCal country rock influence. Think the Birds of Graham Parsons meets Neil Young. Builds on a 12-string acoustic guitar intro with a bit of pedal steel flourishes and a nice organ line. Rain Rain, the track you're hearing right now, is one of the album's first highlights for me. Brings to mind early Peter Frampton solo, which is a compliment for me, with a bit of George Harrison's sitar treatment throughout. It's worth mentioning too that one of Peter Frampton's first gigs after he left Humble Pie was playing on George Harrison's All Things Must Pass solo debut album. Also has powerful vocal delivery from John Davis, and along the lines of Humble Pie, kind of brings to mind Steve Marriott there, but great guitar solo hearing right there on this track too as I talk all over it. Blue as the Moon continues with a sitar sound on a very late period, think Revolver era Beatles psychedelic style sound. Really dig that one as well. Find Yourself Walking shifts into Birdsey Jangle influenced power pop to great effect. Excuse me. Still suffering from a cold, so the coughs might come in there, but I don't feel like stopping time to re-record all over again. Basically, next track we're talking about, Keep a Tight Grip on Your Mind, has cool multi-layered vocals and great bass forward playing, which can be heard throughout the album. Just really great bass lines from John on this whole record, as well as all the other great music stuff he does on the record. Bring It Home to Me is another highlight of the record for me, with its droney, distorted guitar. Sounds like a great lost Superdrag song, so Superdrag fans, you'll dig that one. Hypothetical Shows, mine's the same British invasion territory that the Smithereens used to, and if it wasn't for the fact that I know it was recorded well in advance of the passing of Smithereens frontman Pat Dinicio recently, could also almost be seen as a fitting tribute to him, just in this same kind of vibe you get from it. Open Hearted Lover is another great number that mines at least half a dozen Beatles references to great effect, from the Paul McCartney-like vocals to Nick Slack's Ringo Starr drumming textile. Just great tune. It's Too Late to Change is a sullen, acoustic-driven song with great fuzz guitar solo on it. It's got a bit of Superdrag head drip in every tree kind of outtake vibe to it, and it's also where the album's title comes from in the song's lyrics. I Know How to Do rides a skiffle intro into a British dance hall meets German beer hall, oompa type of song to a bit of upbeat fun. Forever Changes Every Day is a dark charmer with sad sounding acoustic guitar and great electric piano organ solo going on throughout it. And then the first disc closes out with yet another album highlight for me in The Last Thing I Wanted to Do. It starts out with this kind of fake upbeat guitar intro before shifting into Pink Floyd worthy slow blues rock song about 25 seconds in, complete with epic David Gilmour like guitar freakout soloing. Absolutely fantastic. And that's just the first disc. Disc 2 kicks off with Mountaintop, I'm a Goner, a slice of 70s British influenced boogie rock along the lines of Humble Pie or Mott the Hoople, maybe a little Savoy Brown, not necessarily Foghat. I'm For Real builds on a nice fade up of acoustic guitar, drums, and bass. Can't quite put my finger on the musical references there, but I really dig the song anyway. Pictures of Ordinary Things starts on an acoustic guitar 12-string intro, building to kind of a Crosby, Stills, and Nash Young style number, especially in the vocal harmonies. 4 for Tea is a great country rock type ballad with more lap pedal steel flourishes throughout and another more great vocal delivery from John Davis. Can't Hold Back has a Paul McCartney and Wings type flair to it. And then we close out the first side of the second part of the album with It Stings, which is another album standout. It's a heartbreakingly beautiful track with just John Davis's impassioned vocals set against the stark finger-picked acoustic guitar. It stabs you right in the soul with its simple yet effective delivery. It's really, I'm serious, it's the kind of tune that if this doesn't move you, you have no soul. You have no heart. It's just that good. Then we go on to the second half of the second album, which is There Is Love Everywhere. Feels like dark early Beatles mixed with a little bit of the grassroots. There's a hint of that band's Let's Live for Today in the song's intro. I'm Out Here on Everest reminds me a bit of early Who, especially in the very John Entwistle-like bass work. Hard to Breathe Easy is a Beach Boys meets Beatles terrific homage to Brian Wilson style songs, something that John had mined before on Superdrag's In the Valley of Dying Stars album. It's a great effect, really like that there, love it here. Stillness is an Art is a moody kind of late 60s, early 70s vibey number that kind of reminds me a bit of Classics 4, think songs like Stormy and Spooky. Precious Flower is the kind of bossa nova number done by like Astrud Gilberto that I am a sucker for, with some nice Spanish guitar and again great lead vocal harmonies. It's the kind of thing that Stone Temple Pilots will always do, these little bossa nova numbers, and they were always my favorite. Some of my favorite things that band did, and this one equally great here. The album then closes in grand style with All You Really Want Is Love, which again has a very Beatles, John Lennon-like track with All You Need Is Love type vibe. It's a type of song that Oasis would have been extremely jealous to have written, as they had several tracks like it themselves, but just a great closing to a fantastic album. And all those musical references aside, it's just another killer offering from the Lees of Memory in The Blinding White of Nothing at All. I don't know how John Davis and company do it. I really don't. John Davis, Brendan Fisher, and Nick Slack continue to put out exceptional material, and with each album being better than the last one. And like literally, this is like within the last 4 years, 3 fantastic records from this band. And that the fact that this one's a double album, no less, it even further speaks to the talent of this group, and I don't know how they do it, but they keep doing it, and it's awesome. And it's really a shame that more people probably aren't going to get a chance to hear this album. But if you can, man, seek this out, buy it digitally, go to the band's Bandcamp site, pick up the CD, find a way to hear this album and get it, because it is awesome. Easily my favorite album of the year. And thanks for tuning in. If you like this episode, please do me a favor and hit the like button, share it with friends. Facebook's being a bitch right now. My last episode, even though it was shared several times, the post reach on it was pathetic compared to what it should have been. They're really starting to limit traffic. So if you like, especially if you see this on Facebook, please like it, please share it. If you see it on YouTube, please like it as well and share the link to that. Really appreciate it. But please do yourself a favor and check out the awesome album from the Lees of Memory, The Blinding White of Nothing at All. My album of the year for 2017, hands down. That's the show. Thanks a lot for tuning in. We will catch you next time on Sit and Spin. See you then.